Session 4. Atatürk's Revolutions. 1. Atatürk's Revolutions. 1. Introduction. 1. Introduction. To achieve the goal of changing the state structure and functioning style in the Ottoman Empire, which had been implemented as a result of the revolutions in the political arena, TBMM, was first convened on April 23, 1920. After the victory on November 1, 1922, the Sultanate was abolished and Abdülmecit, recognized as the eldest male heir of the dynasty, was elected as the caliph as the caliphate was separated from the Sultanate. Subsequently, Ankara became the capital of Turkey. Due to the vacuum in the form of the state since the abolition of the Sultanate, the Republic was declared on October 29, 1923. With the abolition of the Sultanate but the continuation of the Caliphate, discussions arose about the functionality of the Caliphate when some individuals, the press, and Caliph Abdülmecit attempted to politicize the Caliphate. It was decided that the Caliphate lost its unifying and rallying feature on the Islamic world. Atatürk's Revolutions. 2. The abolition of the Caliphate. 2. The abolition of the Caliphate. Islamic. It is a physical and spiritual personality. He represents the worldly authority as both the head of state and government, serving as the commander of the military, and at the same time, he is responsible of religious matters as the chief imam of the Caliphate.
Ebu Bekir,
Omar, Osman, Ali, Umayyads, Abbasids, Mamluks. 2. The abolition of the Caliphate. Starting from the reign of Sultan Murat I in the Ottoman Empire, some sultans have used the title of caliph. After the conquest of Egypt by Yavuz Sultan Selim in 1517, Ottoman sultans also assumed the title of caliph. As the rulers of the Ottoman Empire were the most powerful political authorities in the Islamic world during those times, they did not feel the need to establish influence based on the caliphate. In the 19th century, facing the emerging nationalist movement, the rulers of the Ottoman Empire utilized the caliphate position in line with the pan-Islamism policy to prevent potential impacts from the nationalist movement. They aimed to make the caliphate a unifying and rallying force. The efforts made by Abdülhamid II in his caliphate policy and the issuance of the Great Jihad Fatwa during World War I ended in failure. 2. The abolition of the caliphate. Some prominent figures gathered around Caliph Abdülmecit Effendi, who adopted attitudes reminiscent of the Sultanate era and contrary to the Republican administration. Abdülmecit Effendi. 2. The abolition of the caliphate. The Republic, established on the principles of nationalism and national sovereignty. England. The leader of Indian Muslims, Imam Aga Khan, and Emir Ali. The caliphate established on the concept of Ummah. The increase of the spiritual power of the caliphate and requests for the preservation of this office. The concern that the caliphate could be used in a detrimental manner by foreign powers. 2. The abolition of the caliphate. Sheikh Safit and the proposal of 50 companions. The abolition of the caliphate and the exile of the Ottoman dynasty from Turkey. March 3, 1924. A significant obstacle to the secularization of the state order has been removed.
İkinci halifeliğin kaldırılması.
Cert Member of Parliament Halil Hulki Effendi. Member of Parliament Vasif Bey from Manisa. The abolition of the Ministry of Sharia and Foundations and the Ministry of War General Staff. The Law of Unification of Education. March 3, 1924. The abolition of the caliphate and the exile of the Ottoman dynasty from Turkey. The abolition of the Ministry of Sharia and Foundations and the Ministry of War General Staff. The Law of Unification of Education. Atatürk's Revolutions. 3. Constitutional developments. Constitutional developments. In the Constitution. The state's form and regime. Laws.
Yasala.
To whom does sovereignty belong? Citizens' rights and duties by whom and how the legislative, executive, and judicial powers will be exercised, state organs, their powers, responsibilities, and working principles are determined. They cannot be unconstitutional. 3. Constitutional developments. Act of Alliance. Tanzimat Edict. First constitutional monarchy. Second constitutional monarchy. 1876. 1908. 3. Constitutional developments. The first proposal submitted to the Turkish Grand National Assembly. It is necessary to establish a government. It is not possible to elect a provisional head of government and to provide a deputy to the Sultan. There is no power above the Turkish Grand National Assembly. Parliament collects legislative and executive powers. A government to be elected from the Parliament handles government affairs. The President of the Parliament is the head of this delegation. 3. Constitutional developments. Revealing the structure of the new state. Motion. Establishment of the Turkish government. He brought new firsts to state life and new features to the state. National sovereignty. Legal assurance. These laws, based on the principle of nation sovereignty and accepted by the Grand National Assembly of Turkey, have the nature of a constitution with the structural changes and new principles they bring to state life. Constitutional laws. 16. ueaden.edu.tr. 3. Constitutional developments. 3. Constitutional developments. April 24, 1920 National sovereignty. September 13, 1920 Political, social, administrative, and military policies of the state. January 20, 1921 First Constitution. 3. Constitutional developments. 23 plus 1 article. The basic articles in the 1921 Constitution are as follows. Sovereignty belongs unconditionally to the nation. Executive and legislative powers appear and convene in the Turkish Grand National Assembly. The state of Turkey is governed by the Grand National Assembly of Turkey, and its government is called the Government of the Grand National Assembly of Turkey. The Turkish Grand National Assembly consists of members elected by the people of the provinces. 3. Constitutional developments. 23 plus 1 article. Elections to the Turkish Grand National Assembly are held every 2 years. The General Assembly meets without invitation at the beginning of November. Fundamental rights such as the implementation of Sharia provisions, the enactment/abolition and amendment of laws, the signing of treaties and peace, and the declaration of war regarding the defense of the homeland belong to the Turkish Grand National Assembly. 3. Constitutional developments. 23 plus 1 article. The Turkish Grand National Assembly manages the ministries that make up the government through the ministers it elects in accordance with the special law. The speaker elected by the General Assembly of the Turkish Grand National Assembly is the Speaker of the Turkish Grand National Assembly for an election period. The provisions of the basic law that do not conflict with these articles are in force as before. 3. Constitutional developments. Sovereignty is given to the nation unconditionally. Legislative and executive powers are concentrated in the hands of the Turkish Grand National Assembly. The principle of union of powers. With the independence courts established under the influence of extraordinary conditions, the idea that the judicial power was in the hands of the parliament became dominant. The Turkish Grand National Assembly also took the judicial power under its control. 3. Constitutional developments. 1924 Constitution. It has a quality that values the democratic principles of the new state, which has achieved a stable order after the victory of the national struggle and the proclamation of the Republic. Dual constitutional order. 3. Constitutional developments. In the 1924 Constitution, it included a softer separation of powers. It was designed to facilitate the transition to the parliamentary system. With the phrase, "the state of Turkey is a republic," the form of government and democratic structure of the state are secured. While national sovereignty is considered the reason for the existence of the state, the source of all power and authority is accepted as the nation.
Üçüncü Yeni Türk Devleti'nde anayasal gelişmeler.
The authority to legislate was given to the Turkish Grand National Assembly. Judicial power is indirectly tied to the parliament. The president is given the authority to send a law to the parliament for reconsideration only once. All powers such as declaration of war, peace, making treaties, printing money were given to the Turkish Grand National Assembly. Executive power was left to the Turkish Grand National Assembly. The principle of electing the president by the parliament, appointing a member of parliament as prime minister, establishing the Council of Ministers and the government program was introduced. 3. Constitutional developments. The 1924 Constitution also included some provisions contrary to secularism. In 1928, provisions contrary to secularism such as the religion of the State of Turkey is the religion of Islam were abolished. The principle of secularism was included in the Constitution in 1937. Atatürk's revolutions. 4. Conclusion. Upon attempts by certain individuals, the press, and Caliph Abdülmecit to politicize the caliphate, the greatest obstacle on the path to a secular state order was eliminated by abolishing the caliphate office. Subsequently, a series of changes were made to the existing constitution, which could no longer meet the needs, in order to secure the political structure of the new regime and establish the legal basis for other planned. 1. Which one of the following is not one of the amendments made in the 1924 Constitution later? A removal of the article stating that the religion of the state is Islam. B. Inclusion of the 6 arrows into the Constitution. C. Increase of the voting age from 18 to 22. D. Granting women the right to vote and be elected. E. Transfer of judicial authority to independence courts. Which of the following is not determined by the Constitution? How universities will be administered. B. To whom sovereignty belongs and how it will be exercised. C. What form of government the state has and what its powers are. D. What rights, freedoms, and duties citizens have and how freedoms will be exercised. E. How legislative, executive, and judicial powers will be exercised. 3. Amir Ali, the private secretary of the King of England and the leader of Indian Muslims, wrote a letter to Ismet Pasha, stating some demands regarding the increase of the spiritual power of the caliph and the preservation of this office. What message should be inferred from Amir Ali's request? Britain's willingness to take on the protection of Islam. B. The potential harmful use of the caliphate by foreign powers. C. India's aspiration to become the leader of the world's Muslims. D. The desire to appoint the caliph as the president. E. The intention to appoint someone more effective as the caliph. Which of the following items is not a characteristic of the 1924 Constitution? It is regulated to facilitate the transition to a parliamentary system. B. The parliamentary government system is fundamental. C. Soft separation of powers is provided. D. The phrase Turkey is a republic is included. E. Parliamentary elections are held every 4 years.